I got myself the new Chanel palette for Valentine's Day. I thought that we would get ready, but also I want to share with you the books that I recently read. I have read 8 books, I think, since giving birth. So let's call it Beauty and the Books. I'm going to use actually 3 of my only Chanel Beauty products, starting actually with a non-Chanel product. This is the Catrice True Skin High Cover Concealer. It has hyaluronic acid and apparently it's waterproof. I really like this because I saw Jessica Braun's recommendation and I don't usually use heavy foundation anymore, so I like to just spot conceal. I have recently had spotty skin. Maybe it's related to postpartum or just general tiredness, and I'm so lazy that I use the same brush for concealing, and this is technically a universal compact powder, I believe, and it's in 30 natural translucent 2, so it doesn't really have much coverage. I do like the compactness of this palette, and I also just realized that the old Chanel palette, I don't know if it's the difference between like bigger and smaller palettes, but this one, the logo is debossed versus this one is just completely flat. So I don't know, maybe they've cheapened out over the years. But if you've seen my makeup collection video, I mentioned this thing smells like saliva, so I'm trying to use it up. I don't think it has expired, or maybe it has just expired, but it's a powder and my face isn't that sensitive, so I don't really mind. So the first book that I read after giving birth was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This is the first of her, I guess, kind of trilogy of romance novels. There are character overlap, but they are standalone romance novels, and I have mentioned in my past book videos that I don't like a romance novel. I just always find them really cheesy, but I've come to change my opinion. I realized I forgot to keep doing my makeup. Maybe this is harder than I think. I can't do 2 things at the same time. I've realized that I'm changing my opinion on romance novels, even though I usually only read them as palette cleanser when I'm in between, I guess, heavier or more important, quote-unquote important books that I want to read. But if a book gives me joy and entertainment, I don't think I should discount them. And also, just because a book to me is a palette cleanser, it doesn't mean it's not a good book. I, obviously read it as a palette cleanser because I was seeking, that quick read and that lost in a completely unbelievable world type of reading experience. Before I keep going, this is the new face palette by Chanel. This is the Jeux de Lumiere. It basically is a all face palette, and that's why I bought this. I want to have another option when it comes to travel palette. You know that I love my Charlotte Tilbury instant look in a palette, but feel like I'm kind of a little bit tired of the look that that palette gives me, and every time I travel I take that palette, so I just wanted, to be honest, some variety, and it was good retail therapy. I have used this basically every time I do my makeup in the past couple of weeks, and I really like how easy it is to use. I'm just using the darker shade as a bronzer slash contour. It is very buildable, just like any other Chanel product, and I also like that I do get an entire face look with this palette, but also comes with a huge mirror, which is helpful. But back to Part of Your World. So it is a romance about an ER doctor in a big major hospital with like generational doctor family prestige, and a small town carpenter, I guess. And also the ER doctor, the female protagonist, she is also older. So it's a slightly unexpected love story premise, but it was entertaining. I mean, to be honest, I just needed some sort of escape from the sleep deprivation when I was feeding baby. So definitely served the purpose. And I read my notes and I did only rate it 2-star. I feel like I must be very harsh on it. But I also think it's just really hard for me to find any sort of romance novel to be really whether relatable or believable. They all tend to be too predicted because you know for the most part, especially if it's a rom-com, it's a happy ending and the plot line can only go, you know, a few different ways. And I rate books with better plots higher rating than books with predictable plots. That's just my personal preference. So I only rated it 2-star, but the enjoyment I got out of it, I'd say it's a solid 3 or 4-star. Just because we are talking about Abby Jimenez, the latest book that I literally just now finished reading is the second book in this trilogy, which is Yours Truly. And this one, I'm rating this a 3-star just because I read the author's note at the end and it is actually based on her or part of her personal experience. The emotions really resonated with me. I do think I will read the next book in the trilogy, which is Just for the Summer, next time I need a palette cleanser. So for this reason, I did get a lot of enjoyment out of this book, so I'm rating this a 3-star. If you are into a good romance, not like super cheesy, then I think this is, I do like Abby Jimenez's writing style. It's humorous at times and it's also like heartfelt at times, which is anyways what I was looking for in a rom-com. So I actually can't believe that I am recommending a romance novel, but I do like the author and I will continue reading her work. So I just did my face with this palette. Now I'm going to take an eyeshadow brush to do my eyes with the same palette, and I just really like the flexibility of this palette. And also everything is not super pigmented. I'm just using this one eyeshadow brush, which is the Charlotte Tilbury eye blender. I actually quite like all of these colors kind of blending together a bit. I typically use the darker bronzy shade and then this like pinkish shade to the lower third of my eyelid just to add a little bit more color. And I do like the highlighting shade for the inner corner of my eye, as well as I'll just dab a little bit at the center of my lid. As you can see, it still gives a very natural, just very healthy glow to the face. This is the makeup look I am aiming for these days anyways. Not super matte, but also not like a disco ball type of glowiness. This is the perfect glowiness. So I quite enjoy this palette and I think I will get a lot of use out of it. I feel like over the past few years I've been semi-watching what Chanel comes up with their makeup products, and a lot of their shades are not really wearable to me. Like I never wear blue eye makeup, and like the purple tones always felt really like they just didn't fit my skin tone. But this palette is the first product that they've come out in a very long time that I feel like, oh, this is actually extremely wearable if you have basically yellow undertone, neutral to yellow undertone, and you are on the semi-pale side. So highly recommend. I think this is still available on the website. The next book that I read was White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I gave up pronouncing his name. Is a novella, or it's a very, very short story. And I think this book was like really hyped up by Jack Edwards. Very quick to read. It gets you out of a reading slump. And also when I was breastfeeding and, you know, taking care of the baby, it just was a quick thing to like pick up and finish and feel good about. Although I do think this book is a little bit overhyped. Just did my eyeliner because I cannot talk while doing my eyeliner. So back to White Nights. I only rated this 2 stars because, like I mentioned earlier, I don't really like books without like much, or novels without much plots at all. I typically do not enjoy novels that focus too much on character development, or like novels that are too much of a vibe than like telling a very intense story. And this book is definitely more of a vibe and more of character development, and there's a lot of like flowery poetic language and wording. So it's not the novel for me, and therefore I think it's a bit overhyped. But it was a quick read, so I didn't regret reading. Then I read the Hunger Games trilogy for the first time. So I am obviously, what is it, like 2 decades? I don't know, or maybe even longer, late to the bandwagon, but it's really good. I think I rated the first book 5 star, the second book Catch and Fire 4 star, Mockingjay I've rated it 5 star again. I think overall this trilogy, I mean, it's like one of the first really popular dystopian novels out there, and being a young adult series, this book conveys such profound messaging, but also using such easy to understood language and concepts. I think it's just a very genius writing on Susanna Collins' part. And I also, right after reading the trilogy, I read the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is the essentially villain origin story of President Snow. And I also thought this book was very, very well written. I rated it 4 stars, and it's very rare for me to rate a character development focused book such high rating. I do think this book is a little bit too long. I think in my little notes to myself, I said, this is a 500 plus page book. If it trimmed off 200 pages in the middle, it would have been a 5 star read. Again, I think 200 pages were probably mainly focused on character development. Again, I obviously still recommend the trilogy as well as the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I think anyone will enjoy this series, and I would want my son to, when he grows up, to read this for sure. And I also binge watched the movies, the original Hunger Game, like the trilogy 3 movies. I watched the first Hunger Games movie when the movie I think first came out, and I do not remember anything in the movie. And I think now that I've read the book, I think the books did such a better job than the movie. The books so vividly pictured that world that I didn't need the movies to bring those to life to me. I think I was just a little bit disappointed at the fashion in the movie. I know it's not a trivial part, but it's not like the main part of the books, but I just thought maybe it was because the movies were done, 2 decades ago now. Like, I feel like had they remade the movies now, they could have done an even better job with the fashion. Because it's in the winter, because I have combination skin, I don't really need to like powder my entire face because it's so dry anyways now. I quite like the glowy look, so we'll just put on the lip last. I don't even know if Chanel still sells these, but it's the Rouge Coco Balm in the shade 916 Flirty Coral. They probably still have this line, I just don't know this particular coral shade is something that they still have. It's basically a tinted lip balm, which is perfect for the winter time. And the 8th book that I read is a more so work related book. It's called For the Culture, and it's written by Marcus Collins. So he is like a senior leadership in, what's it called, Kennedy and something. It's like a really famous advertising agency, and he has run social media for Beyonce. He himself had worked at Nike, at Apple in the marketing department, and I think they also run marketing for McDonald's. And I pretty much never read like very businessy books because I went to business school for my undergrad as well as my master's degree, so I feel like I have seen a lot of case studies and examples and like the textbook principles of essentially how to run business, how to do marketing. But this book actually has a lot of really specific examples that I found actually quite useful, more useful than what I learned at school. I actually am rating this book 5 stars. I think if you are ever curious about building brands, if you are in the process of building brands, this is a must read because I think it tells you fundamentally why is it that certain brands can provoke emotions, affinity, love, and more importantly, attract the, right tribes of people. It's less so that traditional billboard approach of this is what my brand stands for and therefore you need to buy my products or services. It's more so truly deeply understanding your brand's audience and understanding what influences culture so that your brand can stay culturally relevant and even, lead some of those cultural movements to become sustainable for a long run. I do plan to reread this book every once in a while. I do think it just reminds me of why I'm in the field of marketing. That was all 8 books that I read over the past 4.5 months, and this is the finished look, mainly thanks to the latest Chanel palette. Let me know in the comments what is one book that you read recently that you enjoy.